So we're going to discuss what I believe to be the biggest problem with competitive modern Yu-Gi-Oh, which is how overpowered going first is, or how trash going second is, whichever way you want to look at it. In fact, I'd say that going first in Yu-Gi-Oh is probably the single greatest competitive advantage that anyone can have in any form of competition in the entire world. And I'm not just going to use anecdotal evidence here. We're going to be referencing some hardcore stats, like the ones provided by Untapped GG here, which have actual data on win rates going from duels in Master Duel's ranked ladder, going first and going second. And I've set the filter to only include Diamond and Master rank games, so that way we don't have any blue eyes, Chaos Max fudging up the numbers or anything. So here, as you can see, there's a huge difference for going first and going second based on any deck. Like, you pretty much go through any deck, there's just a huge discrepancy between going first and going second. Snake Eyes, best deck in the format, 65% win rate going first, a sub 50 going second, over 50% decrease in win rate just from losing a coin flip. Early, it's even more drastic, even worse, 46% win rate going second. Rescue Ace, a 44.7% win rate going second, over 20% difference in win rate based on nothing done by any player, no player involvement at all. Literally based off a coin flip, based off of rock paper scissors, you can just randomly just gain or lose 20% of your win rate just like that without doing anything. Awesome. Like Monadium, it seems Monadium is like a classic going first combo deck, so that's even larger, like 27 plus win rate discrepancy, like Jesus Christ. Vanquish Soul, similar story. Mathmech, Labyrinth, Live Twin Sprite, Infernoble. Look at Infernoble. Jesus Christ, Infernoble, 32% win rate difference based on if you win or lose the coin flip. Like, gee, that is massive. Like, you keep scrolling down. There's not a single deck that really bucks this trend. Super Heavy Samurai, Branded Despia, Unchained, Mikanko. Okay, Mikanko, the one deck that literally came out and was established as like a blind second deck. As you can see, Mikanko has way more games going second than it does going first, because many people are still playing Mikanko as a blind second deck. And guess what? Mikanko, the blind second deck, has a 20% higher win rate going first than it does going second. What is going on here? I also have my own stats that I manually tracked from the last Duelist Cup that I played over 300 games in, because I just love myself that much. And as you can see, my personal win rate going first is, again, significantly higher than it is going second. And you can especially tell from the two decks that I played the most in, being Mathmech and Monadium, where there's a combined like over 200 games played, that the difference between win rate going first and second is the most stark. So yeah, this is like a trend that's pretty much universal no matter what deck you play, and really no matter which format you're playing in the last few years. And I don't have TCG data, unfortunately. I feel like it would paint a similar picture with one glaring exception that I will get to later. But unfortunately, I have no idea how to actually get data for games played based on going first or second from the physical card game itself. But if anyone does know, Hakuna my data, let me know. I'd love to include that in maybe a future revisit for this video as well. So it's pretty easy to understand why going first is so much better than going second. You get to set up your board, which in the context of modern Yu-Gi-Oh means putting up as many negates or interruptions as you can that prevent your opponent from doing the same thing to you. And obviously the player who goes first has that advantage, since they're not the one playing into the opponent's board that's actively trying to stop them. Meanwhile, all the player going second gets is one measly extra card during their draw phase. And any half-decent starter in any decent deck like Snake Eyes Ash or Mathmech Circular, Branded Fusion, etc., etc., all resolving any one of those cards already gets you multiple cards and an entire end board by themselves mostly, which pretty much nullifies what little advantage that the player going second gets from that one extra card. And now Konami has designed cards that should, keyword should, in theory help the player going second, which mainly fall into two categories: Handtraps and Boardbreakers. So first, why don't we discuss the Handtraps and why they maybe haven't helped going second enough. So actually the biggest issue with Handtraps isn't that they're bad going second. In fact, not only are they actually really good going second, but in many formats like the fire dominated formats that we're currently in like the TCG and Master Duel and parts of the OCG, Handtraps are your best option to help you going second in these formats, since the best way to deal with your opponent's board is to just stop them from actually being able to make the board in the first place. The problem with Handtraps for going second is that they're not only strictly good for going second. For all the Handtraps that I've shown here, and basically most of the commonly played Handtraps in the game, there's nothing stopping the player who goes first from also using these same exact Handtraps to stop the player going second as well. So yes, you can Handtrap some of these first turn play, but the player going first has just as much opportunity to Handtrap the player going second as the player going second has to Handtrap the opponent going first. So yes, Handtraps are great going second, but they're also really good going first, which is why they don't always help the player going second as much as they seem like they should. Honestly, it feels like half the time Handtraps can even make going second harder, since at the end of the day, Handtraps are just basically forms of interruptions that don't require any setup and have nothing to do with your main engine. So you can literally do your normal combo and then still use Handtraps on top of whatever board you just set up and just have extra interruptions like that. And then suddenly whoever goes second has to play through both your board that you made through your combo and just all of these non-engine, all of these Handtraps that you also have in your hand. Since, most decks don't need their entire hand to full combo. Right now, we're in the format where you can do an entire end board off of just one card. Like, imagine a deck doing their entire combo with 1 to 2 cards max, and then the rest of the 3 to 4 cards in their hand are just Handtraps. And then imagine trying to play through that. Oh, that's right. We don't have to imagine that right now. Also, this is more of a side note than anything, but Konami, for some reason, designed anti-Handtrap cards like Call by the Grave and Crossout Detonator. It's like they thought, hey, going first isn't strong enough already. Why don't we print cards that negate the only interaction that the player going second has on the player going first? It's not even like these are the biggest issues with this or anything. It's not like, these cards aren't really played in every single deck or aren't very common in every single format. Look at the TCG. This is like maybe the first format in TCG where Crossout is actually decently popular in. But when these cards do see play, they just make going second even harder. So yeah, I'm not a fan of these cards personally. So if Handtraps aren't the solution to going second, what about Boardbreakers then? Well, a lot of times Boardbreakers tend to have the opposite problem that Handtraps have, whereas Handtraps feel like they're too strong a lot of times and they can help going first as much as they help going second. Boardbreakers just don't feel strong enough a lot of the times. The reason why is that it's better to just prevent your opponent from setting up their board in the first place than to deal with their board afterwards, because modern Yu-Gi-Oh combos are just way too strong right now. You get too much value from resolving your combo, not to mention boards that most combo decks set up are comprehensive enough to where they don't often lose to a single board breaker. As a full board consists of interruptions, it can consist of interruptions from the monsters obviously on the field, but also monsters in grave, like we've seen recently with Promethean Princess. They can be disruptions from monsters that they search and hold in their hand. They can consist of back row, to where if you have board breakers that deal with monsters, you'll still not be able to deal with the back row that they set up. Not to mention that most combos will end up searching some form of follow-up, to where if you don't actually OTK your opponent, then you'll lose on the next turn because they can just do the same combo they did turn 1 on turn 3, and then just kill you there. And don't forget, most combos don't need your whole hand. You only need like 1 to 2 cards usually at most, and at that point you also have to deal with the non-engine and the hand trap they also have in the rest of their hand. And board breakers can't deal with the board on the field, and whatever non-engine that they also have and whatever hand traps they have in as well. So, like, for example, let's look at some modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Combo decks, like Snake Eyes, right? You'll have all of the interruptions on the board, right? You can have synchros if you want. If you're in the TCG, you could have the rank A Titanic Galaxy, or you could have Omega plus this pattern, which just hand loops you, which is also, again, board riggers aren't really good versus hand looping. Also, you have like Appaloosa with IP Masquerena on the field, but also you have the Briefing Princess in Grave as well that you have to deal with. Not to mention that whenever the Flambird goes to the grave, they summon all of their little dudes back. So one, that makes it really hard to OTK them because they just have like an endless conga line of just chump blockers to protect their life points. But also all of these little dudes will search follow up on the next turn to the point where they can do the exact same combo they did on turn 1, on turn 3, and just simply kill you. So you have to deal with all of that stuff. And a board breaker can't deal with literally the entire layered board like that. Other decks. What about Brandon Despia? Okay, well, if you're running board breakers like Lightning Storm, Evenly, Dark Ruler, Lava Golem, none of those do anything because, you know what, guess what? You're gonna get Gimmick Pup with Nightmare Lock, and then you're not gonna be able to play the game anyways. And let's not even get into Brandon's follow-up, aka the main phase 3, where they get to replenish their entire hand back. What about something like Pearly, for example? Okay, well, Pearly ends on a tower, so half the board breakers don't even work on Pearly. You basically have to rely on tribute removal or very specific cards like Hero of the Abyss to deal with Pearly. And if you do that, then they're gonna draw anywhere from 4 to 6 cards during their standby phase before you even can interact with them with one of those semi-generic board breakers. And you know, there's certainly no chance that they're gonna draw into hand traps with their 4 to 6 cards, right? Also, if you, again, for follow-up, if you actually get rid of the Pearly by tributing it, then my friend Pearly will add back 3 quick play spells from the grave so that they can replenish their hand too, and they're going to end up with like 9 to 10 cards in their hand. So if you don't kill them, again, you're going to die on the next turn as well. So not only do most board breakers don't even work against Pearly, again, a lot of their interruptions or their resources they get back in their hand anyways, and board breakers can't even really interact with those anyways. Rescue Ace, a classic example of a deck that has interruption from both their monsters and the back row. That way, if you have like just one card that just deals with one but not the other, if you like Dark Ruler their field or Droplets their field, well, then you still have to play through their back row that they set. If you have Lightning Storm or Duster, then you can deal with the back row, but then they still have Preventer and whatever extra deck monster they have, not to mention the Promethean Princess on board. So there's just not one board breaker that deals with everything they have. And another thing is that board breakers generally won't have as much impact as hand traps do, simply because they're not going to be played as much. And the reason for that is, let's go over some of these. Like Lava Golem, Gameciel, Raigeki, Duster, Change of Heart, Dark Ruler, Lightning Storm, Evenly Matched. The problem with all of these board breakers is that they're useless going first. You literally can't play them. They might as well be dead cards when you go first. Only a small portion of the available board breakers in the game actually have any utility at all when you go first, such as, you know, Forbidden Droplets. And even then, it's conditional a lot of times. Super Poly requires an extra deck building cost that a lot of decks can't actually afford because their extra deck is so tight. You have stuff like Tactics, which does something if your opponent tries to interact with you going first. But if they don't hand trap you, then Talents also doesn't do anything for you. And then stuff like Thrust, which same thing as Talents, except it also requires you to run cards that actually you want to set off of it going first, like trap cards that you may normally not want to run otherwise. So obviously in a best of one format like Master Duel, this is where you'll notice it the most, where these cards lose so much value because you don't know whether you're going first or second each game, and you can't guarantee if the board breakers you put in your deck are even going to be useful to you. So a lot of people just end up not playing board breakers in Master Duel at all. But even in a best of 3 format, decks that side board breakers will only do it when they know they're going second. And generally, these kinds of board breakers are going to be involved in less than half the games that are actually played, because if you're siding them in for when you know you're going second, you're probably not gonna main deck most of them, and then post side, if you're going first, like if you lost a game and you know you're going first, you're also probably not gonna side them in. So they just generally don't have board breakers generally aren't played enough to even have much of an impact going second, to be honest. And because this is a video discussing going second in Yu-Gi-Oh!, we're probably going to have to talk about Tenpai, which is basically the first meta deck in years that actually prefers going second. And without even going over the cards first, I want to make the argument that only having a single competitive deck that likes going second isn't actually a solution to the going second problem. It's more like a band-aid fix at best. Since, hear me out. What if somebody wants to be crazy and not play Tenpai Dragon? What if they want to play one of the dozens of other decks available in the format? What if they don't have any friends to be able to borrow cards from, and in order to play Tenpai Dragon? Since over the last decade plus of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh!, how many meta decks have there actually been that prefer going second? I can think of maybe 3 or 4, like Cyber Dragon at one point, Dinosaurs, Sky Striker sometimes. Like 99% of the time, you don't really have a real choice of playing a competitive going second deck. And the very few times where there is, a deck that likes going second, it's only a single option that you have to pick from. There's also something else to consider, in that going second is so difficult. Konami has printed some of the most heinous cards ever conceived in order to actually help going second. Like, have you read MISC? Sorry. But cards like Miscellaneous Stories and Sangan Summoning, the fact that you need a card that basically prevents any interaction from your opponent in order to actually make a blind second deck good should be telling enough of just how difficult it is going second and what is needed to actually make going second better. And another thing is that if Tenpai continues to dominate like it's currently dominating in the OCG, don't be surprised if the only meta blind second deck that we've gotten in years ends up getting hit by the ban list anyways, and then we end up in another 4 to 5 year drought where we don't have another real option for blinding second in the meta. So honestly, I'm kind of at a loss at how to actually fix the going second problem in Yu-Gi-Oh! A very popular suggestion I know that people have made is that the player going second should open all 6 cards in their hand at the start of the duel, as opposed to drawing their 6th card on their turn during their draw phase. That way, this makes it more likely for the player going second to actually draw into hand traps to use. And I think this would definitely help if this change went through in like Master Rule 6 or whatever, but it doesn't solve the issue of going second, like the fundamental problem of going second. It just increases like the chances of the player going second of drawing into hand traps. And it honestly, it makes board breakers even worse, because board breakers right now, they at least have the advantage of, if you draw a board breaker as your 6th card for turn, they're still useful, whereas a hand trap wouldn't be. And that's kind of as small as that is still a reason to consider board breakers over hand traps right now. And if you don't even have that, like, really, what is even the point of board breakers anymore in Yu-Gi-Oh? I don't know. But yeah, with power creep the way it is right now, if there's no sweeping changes to the Yu-Gi-Oh rule set, then the only other way to deal with this is through card design. And that might mean printing more cards like Tenpai and more cards like Miscellaneous Source and Sangan Summoning that just remove all interaction from your opponent, which I'm not sure players will be happy about that either if that's what it takes to fix going second. So why don't we do some brainstorming and let me know in the comments your best suggestions on how to fix this, since I clearly can't think of any more by myself.